Hello everyone, welcome to IIFL Markets YouTube channel. I am Shweta Papriwal and today in our Leaders Speak series, we have Mr. Viren Shetty, Executive Director, Narayana Health. Welcome Mr. Shetty, it is a pleasure to have you on our platform today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Sir, so starting with the broad-based question, let me ask you your views on the healthcare infrastructure evolving in India over the next 5-year period, given the challenges that we have faced during the COVID pandemic. Also, what role would NH play in India's healthcare evolution journey during this period?
Yeah. While this was true before the pandemic, it became even more true about how desperately short we are in terms of the number of beds, number of doctors, number of nurses, number of technicians across the country.
Correct.
Now, the private sector has done whatever it can to add as many beds as possible, but it is simply not enough, because if you're talking about a disease that affects the whole country at the same time, only the private and the public sector working together can address this shortfall. So I would say over the next 5 years, you're going to see a huge amount of investment from all sides, and it will all be worth it. There'll be a huge amount of investment from the government in adding more medical colleges, nursing colleges, hospitals. There'll be a huge amount of investment from the private sector in adding more capacity in primary care, secondary care, tertiary care. There'll be a huge amount of investment in insurance. A lot of people buying health insurance because now they're a lot more aware about how expensive a healthcare event can be. And that will just mean that there'll just be a lot more attention, awareness, and growth in the healthcare industry.
Right. So can you elaborate on how NH is aiding the COVID vaccination efforts in the country? How many vaccine doses have been administered till date and how many doses NH can administer in FY22? We are also providing vaccines at very low administration charges, which is commendable, sir.
Thank you. So we've been buying as many vaccines from as many companies as we can get our hands on at any price they're willing to sell to us. Initially, the government used to supply us the vaccine. Then under the liberalized policy, we were allowed to buy vaccines directly from the companies. And so from Serum Institute, we bought 3 lakh doses. From Bharat Biotech, we bought around 50,000. From Sputnik, we're going to place an order for another 5 lakh doses. And as and when the supplies reopen sometime next month, we'll start ordering again in lakhs of doses because we have a huge network. In every part of the country, in East India, in South India, and North India, we're available in tier 2 cities. We have partnered with large corporates, apartments, societies. So for us, this is not something we see as a revenue or a margin opportunity at all. For us, the vaccine is performed within our hospital at cost. We're not even charging for the syringe or for the nurse's time. We're just charging whatever it cost us to get the vaccine done, because we believe vaccine has to be free. The reason we lobbied so hard for private sector to be allowed to buy and distribute vaccines is because the reach and the distribution of the private clinics, small hospitals, nursing homes, pharmacies is much greater than if you are just limiting it to a few channels, which is large hospitals in the government or the private sector. So this was to create an example that by opening it up and allowing the private sector to participate, you can get much faster and better coverage without necessarily making money off this. Vaccine was never a big business for us in the past. We don't expect it to be a big business for us in the future, but this is part of the national effort to get the nation back on track. Because once 65, 70% of the adult population is vaccinated, we can all get back to work. We can start the construction, we can start manufacturing, we can start living our lives as normal. So this is just one part that we want to play in getting the country back on track.
Yes, of course, and that's a very commendable part that NH is playing. And sir, so what are the bed capacity and expansion plans over the next 3 to 5 years for NH? What can be the sustainable revenue growth rate with our existing bed capacities or any expansion plans?
Sure. We have 5,500 beds across the country. We have capacity to add another 1,000 beds within our system without investing too much in the civil infrastructure, just by operationalizing few floors, which are right now in the cold shell stage, that we'll be doing over the next 3 years at very minimal cost. These will just be expansionary efforts within our existing hospital setup. Our occupancy pre-COVID, obviously, was ranging anywhere from 55 to 65%, which is capped by the output of the ICUs and the operating theaters. Now, obviously, during COVID time, occupancy was full because no one was getting operated. And so
Right.
ICUs were full, beds were full. So that is an artificial number. Once things go back to a steady state, when people start again coming in for elective surgeries and we're able to plan our discharges very well, we can expect to revert back to a 65, 70% occupancy on a normal run rate basis. But for us, not so much driving occupancy as we want to start driving discharges and throughput. So for us,
Right.
we are actually starting to convert some of our ward beds into ICU beds. We're starting to actually shrink and reduce the total number of beds we have in a hospital to increase the procedures and throughput. So that means decommissioning a floor that may have 20 general ward beds and converting it into a 10-bed ICU. Or it may mean converting a 15-bed general ward area into a dialysis or a chemotherapy area. This may reduce your overall bed count, but what it does is it improves the throughput of the hospital and you're more responsive to patients and their needs. Because what's happened is that not everyone, apart from COVID, of course, is staying in the hospital for very long. Most people want to be in and out. They're just coming here for very specific procedures, not just to stay in the hospital for 10, 15 days. So our hospital has to reflect that.
Right. So how are you looking to drive the growth in your Cayman Islands hospital given the recent expansion plans announced by the management? And also apart from Cayman Islands, what are your expansion plans for the other international markets?
Sure. So the Cayman Hospital has been a standout performer of ours. It's done phenomenally well during the COVID time, if for no other reason that there was very little COVID on the island. So on the Cayman Islands, they were able to lock down the whole country. And there are very few cases. The only case that was recorded was in our hospital itself. And it infected few of our nurses who recovered very quickly. So in the Cayman Islands, we are spending $100 million to add about 150 beds 100 beds in a state-of-the-art oncology-focused daycare and super specialty center in the middle of the city. This is done so that we can expand the range of services we offer, bring some services closer to the city, move some services away from our existing infrastructure into the new infrastructure so that the output of these people will go up. And in addition to that, we will be adding a lot more in the clinics, primary care, pharmacy, diagnostics across the island. So what our plans for the Cayman are, as the things start to unlock and people start moving around, is that we will have a range of services that we can offer to them, not just super specialty, elective, tertiary care procedures that we were known for. We want to be in primary care, we want to be in diagnostics and pharmacy across all businesses. So not all of this will be as high margin business as running a standalone surgical center, but for us, for right now, we want to grab market share and go for revenue growth. And if it means sacrificing some margin in the short run, that is an acceptable thing for us. We want to be very aggressive on pricing, and we're going to be very aggressive on getting into a lot of specialities that currently there are very few options available on the island, and Cayman citizens go abroad to get treatment at an extremely high cost. And we believe we can offer those services at a much lower cost with much safer outcomes, eliminating travel and all the inconsistencies that come with that. So by giving them a local option available, we can lower cost for the people in the Cayman Islands.
Of course. So what are your post-COVID complications? How do you see these post-COVID patients requiring medical care over the next 6 to 12 months? With the recent second wave of COVID, how did NH hospital occupancies trend during the Q1 FY22?
Yeah. So one of the sadder parts of COVID, it affected so many people, so many families, and there were just, millions of people have died from this, and millions more will live with the scars of COVID. It's still too early to say. We are seeing evidence of right now, even though the COVID has come down to single-digit total positivity rates across all the cities, our ICUs still get people with the remnants of COVID, people who've been in our hospital for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, still their lungs are trying to recover. We are going to see, we predict, a lot of lung transplant cases that may be required. We're going to see a lot of COVID-impacted cardiac ailments. Now, it's very difficult to say whether these people would have had the cardiac issue anyway. It's just coming to them a lot sooner, and we are detecting it because they happen to come into a hospital when they were 35 rather when they were 45. So it's difficult to extrapolate that, but definitely if the textbooks are still going to be written, and they will say there will be a field called general medicine, And I've read that they're going to have a separate field just called COVID medicine until we figure this disease out. So I expect definitely it will be something hospitals will have to spend a lot more time focused on. And to the extent of what contribution it will have to the business, it's too early to speculate, but definitely it'll be part of the overall business for most hospitals for, many months to come easily.
Correct. So has the COVID second wave impacted our regular business, elective surgery volumes, and how is our base business doing now, given that we are past the peak of second wave?
Yeah. So April and May were particularly difficult months for us. In April, we saw, past a 7% slide in the overall revenues. In May, we saw a further slide from there. June was the month of recovery for us. We're starting to see a slow crawl recovery back to normal numbers. If you look at on a daily revenue basis, we are about 85% of what we were doing pre-second wave in March. But again, that is distributed very unevenly across the different departments. So in cardiac is a lot more, it's driven by elective surgeries and heart attacks and people coming in with planned surgery. So that is still about 60% of what it was pre-COVID. Whereas things like oncology was basically unchanged. You don't ever delay a cancer diagnosis.
Right.
The oncology business was unchanged during COVID and even now. Whereas the other things that we have, so for example, renal business, the kidney, dialysis, all of that was at 90% of what it was. The medicine department, medicine means COVID for us, so it is 200% of what it was pre-COVID. But neuro, gastro, 60%, 80%. So we're looking at a slow recovery in June. July, hopefully, as things open up and people start getting more comfortable coming to the hospital and the pace of vaccination goes up, we feel very confident that July will be the month of full recovery. Till, of course, if another wave happens or something else that we don't know, but that's how it is.
Right. So what are the expected revenue growth rates for NH mature hospitals in India as well as for Cayman unit that is already operational for the next 3 to 5 years? What kind of growth rates do you expect?
So we don't go into the forecasting. We've not done in the past, but
Correct.
I will say that barring anything, happening with additional waves or this virus mutating or so on, we expect a return to normal. So if you look at the 3-year normalized run rate pre-March 2020, the growth rate in the revenue, we feel very confident in being able to sustain that, driven by, although there may not be as much top-line growth in some of the mature hospitals, there are a lot of new hospitals we have that will reach profitability and they have very strong growth rates, as well as a lot of the mid-market hospitals we have broken out and gone to that next level. Further, we are expanding the scope of services, adding oncology to all our hospitals. And that is an investment that will take the next 2 years to add linear accelerators, bunkers, medical oncology units, as well as the beds to support that. And that will kick in from the 3 to 5 year time frame onwards. And so we feel confident in being able to have a sustainable growth rate of what we were able to do in the past, barring, of course, any COVID-related upsets that would come about.
Correct. So you expect to return to pre-COVID levels?
Pre-COVID levels of growth.
Yeah. So do you see any opportunities for cost rationalization in the business, and what can be the sustainable EBITDA margins, RoCE profile over the next 3 to 5 year period with the targeted expansion plans in Cayman Islands? And do you see your margins and return ratios also moderating over the medium term?
Okay. So that's 3 different things.
Yes.
Let's get to the first one, the cost cutting. Cost cutting, there was a one-time exercise what we did, which was salary cuts. That's not sustainable at all. A lot of hospitals took it, and it was a very short-term thing to do just to manage the cash flows at that time. That's not a sustainable practice. There are a lot of long-term, I wouldn't say cost cutting, but more of efficiency practices that we are going about, which is increased digitization, optimizing a lot of our waiting areas, doing a lot more with kiosks and so on to improve the throughput and efficiency of our pharmacies and OPD areas. So those may not lead to a 10% reduction in manpower, because whatever you save on manpower, you'll be spending on technology.
Correct.
But it is scalable, because once you put in these systems, any further growth that you will put in it has a lot of operating leverage built in, because you don't need to spend that much more on additional technology. So these things will kick in only 2-3 years from now, once our whole digital transformation program is fully complete. The second part you said, what will the
EBITDA margins and RoCE
EBITDA
profile.
margins? Yeah. Now, we haven't taken up any aggressive expansion in India. We've taken that up in Cayman. So Cayman obviously will see a sort of EBITDA stagnation or maybe even a slight decline. When you have this part where there are 2 hospitals open, there's a lot of capacity that's being brought in and a lot of the cost being borne with the volume yet to recover to fill up those 2 hospitals. We feel very confident it can happen much sooner than the 3 years it took for the Cayman hospital to break even. But for that time, in that much sooner period, whether it is 1 year or 2 years, you can expect the EBITDA decline and then obviously a very strong growth from that. In the India business, because we, most of the, I don't think in another 2 years, none of our hospitals will be loss making, barring, of course, if we were to open up any new hospitals. So the EBITDA would just, grow from that point. It's just a base effect, what we would have. So EBITDA growth, we feel pretty confident about. RoCE, that would depend on the capital that we start to employ. We have taken a pretty aggressive CapEx budget this year to upgrade a lot of our infrastructure, to upgrade a lot of the aging medical equipment that we have. This is, upgrades that have been postponed during this entire COVID year. So we're essentially taking up 2 years worth of CapEx in this 1 year. So that may have, maybe a 1 year blip on if you were to measure RoCE just in that 1 year period. But of course, it will contribute almost immediately because the patients are already there and the equipment is getting utilized from day one. So the RoCE should continue to remain strong from the India business.
So at the end, I just want to ask you any other growth strategies that the company is planning to put in place?
Yeah, the 3 things that we are focused quite a lot on. Number 1, the technology, which I've spoken about a lot.
Correct.
We spent all this time building up our back-end core technology. These are not patient-facing applications. These are back-end applications that our hospital system runs on. This is a software we call Atma. It's built on the latest stack. It's built completely by us with this close cohesion between software teams and the clinical and operational teams. And we've gotten evaluated by independent experts, and they just say that this is, as of right now, the
Correct.
best software for running hospitals in the world. Not because we're anything great, but we are a little good, but because it's built on the latest standards. So the backend technology has been completed, its rollout, and that is also getting its growth. But now we'll be focused a lot more on building patient-facing applications. So these are apps for appointments, apps for booking lab tests, apps for getting a medical record sent, apps for consulting with the doctor. The ones we have right now are obviously, as with any new software, buggy and have a lot of issues, but we will be ironing them out going forward. And that will, we believe technology will be a significant contributor to digital first revenue. And that's something we're pushing very strongly on. The second growth plan, again, we spoke about, I had spoken earlier about this, in providing primary care. See, as a hospital, we're focused entirely on doing surgeries. 80% of our business comes from doing surgeries and cutting people open and getting them treated in a hospital. But the business is changing. People are not as comfortable coming to hospitals anymore. They want things available much closer to them, either at home or in the workplace or online or, walking distance. And that's something we want to be able to provide. So another bit of, expansion and money we will be spending going forward will be in providing primary care. But the difference being operating it in a fully integrated manner. So a patient from NH should be able to do follow-ups in the clinics nearby to their house and send the reports there, and we'll be able to collect the samples there or get it done from their house. And all of those records travel with them. So we're not taking as aggressive a primary care vertical as a couple of other groups have done. This we don't believe can exist as a standalone business yet, but we're doing it in a way that fully integrates with the patients that come to NH. And so we're able to ensure that loyalty and engagement stays with NH even after they've been discharged from a hospital. So in primary care, we'll be spending not a lot because this is quite asset light and we're renting spaces. You're spending a little bit of money on getting to primary care for giving that end-to-end experience for the patients. The third part is the Cayman, obviously. So we're spending 100 million on the expansion. We're exploring more growth opportunities in the Caribbean, LATAM, North America region. There are a couple of things we're pursuing, and that is an area we feel extremely excited about. Number one, because obviously the North American region spends the highest amount on healthcare in the world. It is hugely inefficient. We built a model in Cayman with the idea that we can provide a model for how healthcare should be delivered in the first world. which is utilizing our technology and efficiencies to lower the cost of healthcare. And we believe this is a universal model, not just for India, but for the whole world.
Correct.
And this is something that maybe not in the short term, but in the medium term, we're quite excited about looking towards opportunities in that area.
So thank you so much, Mr. Shetty, for taking the time out. It was indeed a pleasure talking to you and understanding the company's growth strategies ahead. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.